Welcome to the Bagel Logic Podcast, the show where Papa Thom spreads wisdom like a smear of cream cheese on an everything bagel. Here's your host, Tom Jennings.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Bagel Logic Podcast. I'm your host, Tom Jennings. As always, I apologize for the length of time between episodes. The time has kind of gotten away from me, but I will update you as to, well, maybe we'll call it the good, bad, and the ugly. This could be a typical starting point for every podcast. We'll start with the good, because it's always nice to start with the positive. And in the good part of it, I did do a stand-up set. First time in 3 years on Thursday. Felt really, really good about it. It was what they call a clean set, so no swearing, no sexual innuendo, none of that stuff. And oddly enough, I felt very in my element. So it, in many ways, as counterintuitive as this sounds, I was more in my element. And I think that comes from the fact that ultimately I'm not I swear a lot, but I'm not like an overtly like sexualized type person. So the sex jokes and the porn jokes and all that stuff that you get at a typical open mic night in a Buffalo or Rochester or any city on a open mic night, I sort of fall within the fray sometimes and go, I'm going to try to out dirty the jokes. But at 56 years old, when you tell a dirty sexualized joke, you just come off as a creepy old man. So we're just gonna call it what it is. So it was nice to be able to be in, and this was a fundraiser for the local chapter of the Special Olympics. So, I mean, really just a great group of people. Everybody was laughing, and I believe I had a solid set, and I'm pretty critical of my comedy sets. So that's a good. Another good in another, we're going to call this a slash, because we'll get to it in a minute. We did finally decide to stop, well, I guess for lack of a better term, what I call weekly operations of our bagel operation. And one of the early episodes I had on the Bagel Logic podcast was how to fail in business. And in some ways, I was trying to figure out a way to exit this thing gracefully without feeling like a failure. But that's never possible, is it? Anybody out there who's got any sense of pride or accomplishment? I will say this, I ran 2 full marathons and 4 half marathons. I broke my leg when I was trying to run my 5th, and then decided that I'd rather just get really fat and lazy. And I've done a great job at that. But before I decided to get fat and lazy, I was a runner. I was really into it. And then, it was taken away from me because I broke my leg. And in some ways, there's some parallels with the bagel business, because I've developed this condition called trigger finger. And it's really weird. Your fingers, it's more so on the right than it is the left. They'll lock up, and it'll lock up like it's like you're holding the trigger of a gun. Now, that in and of itself isn't such a big deal. And I've kind of dealt with some wrist pain over the last year and a half. But the trigger finger is, it locks, and you can't even physically put it back in place. So you just have to wait it out. And it is so painful. I always used to use the joke, even more painful than my first marriage. It really was in this case. Different kind of pain, obviously. But it was, we got to the point where, man, we were working these crazy hours, and all this stuff was happening as well. We were looking into getting some equipment to automate the operation so that I wouldn't have to do the wrist portion of it, or maybe find some help or any of that stuff. And I don't know. I'm just not well enough connected to make that happen. And we were, I mean, I'll get to it in a bit, but there's a degree of disappointment that we weren't able to find anybody that was able to at least step in and handle some of the physical portion of the work, because our sales were great. We were up 40% from last year already, 40. We had, not that these are big numbers, so it's not earth shattering, but they're numbers. We did $10,000 in sales 2 years ago. We did 17 last year. We were on pace to do about I think 35. So this probably would have been the year that we would have been able to legitimately be profitable. I mean, we weren't profitable last year because of, I didn't get paid. I wasn't on the payroll. My wife was on the payroll about half the time, but we were moving towards a situation where it would have made sense for us to offload the physical portion of it, work towards the marketing, and then we could increase the sales. Because, hey, let's do math here, folks. If you've got people that are younger that can create the product, they can create it quicker, then it's worth paying them. Whatever I'm paying them, I'm going to get back in the form of better productivity. And it really just got to the point where, and I don't want to say this with Tracy because Tracy is a very, very efficient worker. My wife Tracy, who did the business with me, but we're just too old to really kind of have the pace that you need to bang out a ton of product. That's just what it came down to. But the physical aspect of it got to the point where the thing that freaked me out was I tried to hold a record album and put it on the turntable, which is a pretty normal occurrence in my house. I'm sitting right now in a room with, probably close to 2,000 records. I mean, if 2,000 is an exaggeration, 1,500 is not an exaggeration by any means. But wherever the case, I mean, I listen to records every day at some point, as long as I'm home. That's the part where you get a little freaked out. And then the same week, I had to write addresses on some envelopes to send report cards out because I'm a teacher during the day. And it just was excruciatingly painful. And we had taken a week off for St. Patrick's Day, and that had definitely alleviated it, just having a couple of weeks off, so realizing the recovery. And then I'm taking some prescription medication, which I think is a generic form of Celebrex. Boy, this stuff is exciting, isn't it? So that's where we were at. And then I was like, I'm going, what do you do? So we kind of pulled the trigger on that. Now there's another aspect of it that's the uglier aspect. I mean, really ugly. When I say ugly, with a capital U, one of the reasons that I haven't been as consistent with the podcast over the last 2 months, let's say, is at work, and I'm a special education teacher, and I'm assuming the kid doesn't have the attention span to listen this far into a podcast because I've probably bored them to death, which is good. But we were, my wife and I guess my family to a certain extent, were dealing with a student of mine, and that is now a former student, thank God, as of Friday, who was stalking us, and both on the internet and in other means. And the nature of the stalking was pretty horrific, and it was going on for about a year, and it had only involved me for about a year. And then it spilled over into my wife's social media. I was starting to get some prank phone calls at work, and I mean, we installed a security camera system on a house, just to make sure that we could monitor the situation. It was just horrific. And I'm not going to try to get too graphic, but I suppose I have to get graphic enough for people to understand the seriousness of it. The kid was saying in my classes that he was going to, and he used a different word for it, but that he was going to ejaculate on my 4-year-old granddaughter's face. Now, when you are dealing with students in special education, many times this can be considered a manifestation of their mental health problems. I really don't know what precipitated this, and I'm not saying this to be, just excuse it away or whatever, but I'm really not a dick of a teacher. I mean, I'm firm. I'm not a disciplinarian. And in my career, I've never dealt with anything like this. And there's really two types of situations that come up when kids say things like that. If they say something like that in anger, I don't take it personally because I understand that is like a component of whatever their frustration is. So I mean, I've been threatened to be killed. You know, I've been spit on. I mean, it's just I've been hit. You know, it happens. But if I'm dealing with a kid who, let's say, has bipolar disorder and they lose their mind and they say things to me, when they come out of it, they usually realize what has happened. There'll be what we call a reconciliation. Sometimes we call it, you call it processing, whatever. And where people will sit down and say, you know, what happened? And those things are fine. This was like a calculated long-term thing that he began to kind of involve other people in. And understandably, if you're going to hit me as a human being and you want to hit me in a spot that's really going to cause me sleepless nights, to be disturbed, that's, you strike somebody at their Achilles heel or their heart. That's my granddaughter, hands down. That's it. This is a young lady who's very important to me, who has taught me how to love in a way that I never thought I could love before. And it's almost weird to say this, but I guess the mistake that I'd made is that I let some students know that. And this particular student, I mean, I'll never know what the issue was. And for the longest time, I was just kind of told, you know, oh, this is what you signed up for. Kids do this kind of stuff. And it was constant. And the social media aspect of it too, to relate this all to the bagel business, he was getting to the point where he was creating these fake profiles and putting reviews on our page about how there was hair in his bagel and, you know, this is the worst bagel ever. And then doing the comments about, you know, the family and all that stuff. And then eventually he sought out my wife's social media. He posted on pictures of her with my granddaughter. He was posting on pictures of me with my granddaughter. So I had to lock all my social media accounts down to private, with, I guess right now, the exception of the reel. So in some ways, the bagel business was this like open wound or open target where he would be able to go in and still kind of needle at us. Because, I mean, I was dealing with phone calls at work where he would call posing as my daughter-in-law. So he would, you know, the kid would mention how much we paid for our house and, you know, family members and all that stuff. And I realized that this information, so much of this information out there is public. And when you're dealing with a stalker, if somebody is looking for information for you, it's not that difficult. It's really not. And so if there's anything of value in this particular podcast, this is a portion that I hope you find some value in terms of dealing with a stalker. I'm going to offer you, I'm empathetic with anybody that's had to deal with this. And yeah, if you listen back to the episode I had with where I talked about Judge, you know, the kid Judge. I mean, it was kind of a short situation, but similar, and you know, eventually things worked out. This just kept getting worse and worse, and the administration, I don't know that they necessarily knew how to deal with it at first. And once it spilled over into, you know, my business page, my family page, and all that stuff, I mean, I lost it. I went through an incredibly dark period of depression, which is exactly what the student was trying to accomplish. So if you are listening, congratulations, you did it. I mean, there was a point where I just installed the security camera. Somebody was at the door, and there was this kid wore a headdress a lot of times. So there was a mailman that was delivering, and there was a guy standing on the sidewalk off in the distance, which I assume was a supervisor. This guy must have been training the other guy. And I woke up in a half sleep, and I thought it was him standing outside the door. And I mean, my heart was racing 1,000 miles a minute. And yeah, I guess this makes me sound like a pussy to some people, but it was a horrible experience. And I complained to anybody I could complain to get this kid out of the school. Eventually, you know, he did. He crossed the line. They were originally with just the sexualized comments, which he was putting on my wife's page, because my point was, listen, you said that I signed up for this, but my wife didn't. And certainly my kid's family didn't either. And that was not an easy conversation either. Finally having to tell, family members, please be careful to watch out for that. I don't know if this kid has a propensity towards violence. He'd been accused of bringing a gun to school. That's just the reality. And unfortunately, with the population that we deal with, a kid in a special education setting that is accused of a thing that would be a huge deal in a public school setting, somebody's threatened to bring a gun. It's like, whoa, we're going to lose our mind. I mean, that's not that uncommon of occurrence at my current situation, which, yeah, it is what it is. It's sad, but that's just the reality. But nevertheless, you have all this stuff kind of working in the background. And we did have to go to law enforcement because there's probably people out there thinking, oh, is this a crime? And I don't want to get into the whole, the judicial system is... Maybe I do, because it's true. The judicial system, especially as it comes and relates to juveniles, is pretty pathetic. We found out very hard. Now, there's a movie... I apologize if I'm bouncing all over the place, but this is really the first time I've been able to talk about it in any way that was not involved with, like, literally tears coming out of my eyes. But so we were trying to deal with law enforcement. There's this movie Super Troopers I saw when I was a kid, and there's this scene where they all get together and they're all trying to figure out who's got jurisdiction over this thing. So in our case, when we tried to file a police report, since the social media harassment, which to me was, pedophilia, you're threatening a sexual act on a 4-year-old girl, and she's since turned 5, but whatever. And so they're like, well, you gotta file the report in the county you live in or the town you live in. Well, so we did. And then they kicked it back to the jurisdiction of the police department for the school. And then they kicked it to the jurisdiction of the town where the kid lived in. And they're like, well, you got to go to this court. You got to go to that court. You got to go to this court. You got to go to that court. Really? I mean, who's the victim here? So then it became, since they were harassing me at work, that it had to be the work police to deal with my harassment, since they were harassing my wife while she was at home. And I guess evidently... Yeah, here's the thing. Like, if somebody harasses you on social media, it's the jurisdiction of where you receive the message. So what? If my wife was in California, do we call the California police because she's on vacation and gets to social media? I don't know. My point being, if you wonder why people do the things that they do in terms of kids and the harassment and all that stuff, because they understand the system a heck of a lot better than we do. They understand that they are untouchable when it comes to certain things. In a civilized society, nobody in their right mind is going to support a kid, regardless of whatever mental health condition that they have, that is going to make sexualized comments towards a toddler. Okay? It's just not, if Adolf Hitler had a mental health condition, which I'm sure he did to some degree, nobody's going to go, oh, it's just a manifestation of his mental health condition. There are things that warrant either a greater need of supervision, greater mental health services, but at some point you gotta take away the tools. And the sad part too is that in our situation, the parent was not all that supportive. At first I thought they were, but then it became like, well, he's good for me. He's good at home. So what do we do? I'm going to get a big amen from anybody that's a parent out there right now. If my kid did this, the police would be the least of their problems. And I'm not saying that like I'm some hard ass that's going to, do something really physical to them or beat them or anything like that. No, but certainly they would have restrictions in place, and I would nip it in the bud. But that being said, it's easy for me to say that because my kid would never get to that point. They just wouldn't. I believe that. And, thankfully, again, in this case, the kid had to be, he had to go, if you don't know anything about special education, they have a thing called that manifestation hearing. I used that term a little bit earlier, where they determined that this wasn't a function of their mental illness, that this was just deviant behavior. And I respect that. Were we able to get any kind of justice out of it? No. Do I think it's over? I hope so. I don't know. My hope is with the kid being not in my class, not around, any of that stuff, that we won't have to deal with it anymore. But it is, so when you have to bring it back to the whole bagel decision, for 2 months, I'm terrified of just posting basic information on the webpage to promote the business, because I don't want to have to deal with the constant monitoring of the page and all of that stuff, which is going to create more stress in a situation that had already stressed me the hell out. Okay? It really had. And I don't think there's anybody listening to this that would think that that's unreasonable. And it's not like it's something that you can talk to about with a lot of people. And as a guy, you don't really have those support systems that females do. And I'm not trying to stereotype, but it's just, it's typical situation when it comes to males and females. Now, my wife knew that some of this stuff was going on, obviously, because she manages the social media page along with me, or at least the messages and everything. And of course, she was the one that eventually got the messages from this kid about the granddaughter message and everything. But it's, I don't know. I didn't want to tell anybody what was going on. I didn't, because it bothered me to talk about it. I was really upset. I'm amazingly past it more than I thought I would be, because there is some relief, because for the longest time, I really couldn't say anything to my family. You don't really have to be very careful when it comes to HIPAA and privacy laws and things like that. So in this respect, I'm not giving any information away that would identify this particular student, nor would I. And I don't hate the kid. I feel bad for them. And there's a part of me that has had to really try on some level to find that balance between having some sympathy / empathy for his situation and allowing myself to continue to be a victim. And that's what it really comes down to. There comes a point, if you're being victimized, that you have to own your part of the equation. And so I did. I allowed myself to become a victim. And it's part of my past. I believe I've mentioned this on episodes before, but if you have been the victim of sexual abuse at any point in your life, I believe that you have a posture, you have a way of presenting yourself in a way that predators can perceive and pick up on. I don't necessarily think it's extrasensory perception, or these are demons, or any of that stuff. I think it is from just a purely scientific, social scientific standpoint. It's like great salesmen. They know who they can sell to. Unfortunately, predators, they know who they can prey on. And it doesn't matter if they're 10 years old or 100 years old. They know how to do it. So it's pretty crazy to think about, here I am, 56-year-old dude with a master's degree, and I'm being victimized by some, either middle or high school age student. I'll try to give you the least amount of identifying characteristics as I can, but a young person, a juvenile. And, when you've decided as a vocation to work with students that have mental health issues, because you empathize with people with mental health issues, when that somebody uses that as a weapon against you, it's like, whoa, it's pretty heavy stuff, but I'm coming out of it. And, ultimately with the bagel business, between the social media aspect of it, which was becoming burdensome and stressful, and all that stuff. And here's the other thing, you put something like this out while you're still active in business, and people are going to be like, oh, look at him looking for sympathy and help. And so I didn't really want to have to deal with that bullshit. I mean, I certainly, if you didn't have to be a rocket scientist to know that my wife and I needed help, and we would, through the course of the 3 years, I mean, if you want to talk about being victimized because of who I am, I mean, we were the crap that people tried to pull on us in terms of ripping us off. I mean, I could do I could do a podcast series on that. So we it just said it ran its course to a certain degree. Do I think I'll pick it up and revisit it again someday? Yeah, if I don't have to do the bulk of the physical labor, if I can put myself in a supervisory position and maybe do that. And really comes down to time too. But, going back to stand-up comedy, it just made sense for me at this time because I needed to fill a bit of a void and wanted to do something that didn't involve a ton of physical labor, even though, let me tell you, man, stand-up comedy involves a lot of mental labor. You really have to work very hard at your jokes and hope that they land in some way, shape, or form. So, yeah, that's where we were at. And, in terms of we made, I guess I did. No, I can't say we, or can't say I, it was me. Here we go. Jumbling Tom, the jumbling man, jumble voice. If you've made it this far into the podcast episode, and you've listened to the logic of the shutting down and all that kind of stuff. In fact, I think it was maybe 2-3 weeks before we shut down, I had found a thing that automated the portion of the process that was causing the most physical pain on myself and my wife. And we had a good friend. He called and offered to give us the money to get it. And sometimes the friends that people expect the least out of are the ones that give you the most. But he's always been that guy. Always. He's a friend of mine that has kind of a gruff exterior and can be very off-putting to some people, as I'm sure I can be very off-putting to some people and many people. But it was just really a very benevolent gesture, and I had to kind of contemplate that. But again, after having gone through the last 2 months of just the stress of the stalker, it was like, Jesus, do I really want to continue to go on and do this? And ultimately, part of the decision too is having to do with this podcasting, not necessarily this podcast, because I don't know if this podcast really has potential. I hope it does. I think it does. I've got to tighten up the format a little bit, be more consistent in terms of putting out episodes on a regular basis. I think that the episodes I've done with Josh Kogalan, for example, are excellent, and would really like to pursue that and then add a third female. And, we've had somebody express interest in that as well. Her name may begin with a J. I don't know. But if we could put together a team of people that can do this podcast and maybe balance it between, goofy banter and serious subject matter, I think it would be good, because it needs to, obviously a decent podcast has to have a balance of one or the other. And people talk, you get so many people out there that are so-called experts. Like, I'm not really an expert on anything. I have a lot of experience, and that gives me a level of knowledge, maybe not expertise in particular areas, but I think there's some value in that. But I also know that I work better in situations where I have other people to either keep me focused or maybe stimulate the thought process in terms of things. And I consider myself, I'm as open-minded as you can be at 56 years old. You get to age is a thing, and experience. And if you're older, you simply have more experience. So you become a little more rigid in your tastes and things and music and food and in thoughts. So the advantage I have is I work with youth, so I'm exposed to a lot of new things that I wouldn't normally expose myself to if I was just an old dude that was living in Florida playing golf every day. But so in that respect, it's important for me to be able to hear other people's opinions, agree, disagree, or anywhere in between, and kind of go from there. So, yeah. So that was that, and it's been a weird couple of weeks. My sister moved up here from Savannah, Georgia, which is nice because she really filled a void when my mom died, and that's definitely worthy of a podcast, kind of talking about how that relationship has evolved over the last 35 years. And but then, the crappy stuff, just the annoying stuff, lost my wallet. I've had this wallet for forever. So depressing, having to go through and get all my identification redone, blah, blah, blah. And then we had this final, I'll probably just wrap up with this story because it's just, man, I'm one of those guys that there's certain things that just really, 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 really piss me off. Piss me off a lot for a very short period of time. So this was kind of we'll call it a 24-hour piss offer. But one of those things that if I didn't deal with it on some level, that it was going to eat me alive, especially after, the whole stalker incident and feeling victimized. And again, going through, 3 years of just people trying to fuck us any 6 ways that they could in terms of our business and all that stuff. But, you're right. I did this clean comedy show and I couldn't do a clean podcast. Sorry for the swear words, folks. But anyhow, since I only used the F-bomb once, maybe it had a little bit more power. I don't know. My wife would not agree. She never uses that word. She's a better person than I am, and in all honesty, because I don't know how she was raised. She had great parents. But anyhow, so we closed the business, but we were kind of in a situation where I was hoping that because of just the nature of it, the immediacy of the closure, the circumstances behind it that people knew about, which was the physical aspect, the trigger finger and everything, and not knowing any of the other backstory, that somebody would come along and at least either, I don't know, something. Okay. So for instance, I worked at that place, A10 Meadworks. It was a craft beverage place. And so he, same thing, shut down. From what I understand, didn't even tell his landlord before he posted on social media, just a sudden gut-wrenching decision. These decisions are never easy, even if they are the right decision. So we shut down, and I thought to myself, I don't know, maybe some young entrepreneur will come in and go, hey, show me the recipe. Let me take it over. Let me do this thing. And in Brian's case, what had happened is this winery said, hey, come join us to do your thing at our facility. So rather than just let the business die, somebody came and swooped in and helped him out. And in our case, we were dealing with we've had this one coffee shop, and there's been 2 owners that have cycled through it. In fact, we've dealt with 5 coffee shops. Yeah, 5 or 6. I don't know, whatever. And we're down to like these last 3. Now, one of them was getting our product closer to home, but we offered a bunch of different bagels, and they just only wanted one type. And I didn't really know what was up with that until one day I get this call like, hey, take a look. I got this new kitchen that we're building, and before we build it, we want to have renters. So I'm like, oh, okay. So see, this is an old sales tactic, effective in many cases. What happens is you build a financial relationship between 2 people, and then you leverage that relationship, because now you've given me money for my product. I'm supposed to perceive that I owe you something because you've paid me for it. And this guy, he's a good businessman. He negotiated the price of the product to this ridiculously low level where we were literally losing money on it. And my original thought was, once we get the first one in, we'll take over all the business and we'll eventually make it. So loss leader, I guess is the term. And that didn't work out. He had his intention was all along to try to rent us a kitchen facility for twice what we're paying now. I think maybe, a little bit more than twice, and with less equipment. Wow, there's a great deal for you. So there you go. How to Fail in Business by Tom Jennings. And man, did I feel dirty on that one. But the other thing that we used to run into all the time is it's funny, the first person that we sold bagels to for wholesale, they told us that they didn't think they were going to sell a lot, and then they sold a ton. And anybody that's come in with like, oh, I'm going to go through, 150 dozen a day, and they hardly sell any. So we had two that had been left after the smoke cleared. Well, three, I guess they said. That guy that was close to home, I just, whatever. As soon as, it's a funny thing is, as soon as I said, yeah, this isn't really for us. I mean, he really didn't contact us much, and whatever. Business is business. I love that. This is what I've heard over the last 3 days. Business is business. So, anyhow, we had this one young guy. He didn't expect to do much, and he was just doing gangbuster business. We were getting to the point too. We were thinking, when we were dealing with the physical demands and the time commitments, is that we were at and I apologize if I'm boring you, but my wife and I were spending part of our days at a farmer's market. So we'd make the product, we'd sit at the farmer's market all day. So it was 12, 13-hour days. I was thinking, well, you know what? If we just make the bagels for the coffee shops, we'll cut our time in half. But I had to figure out a way to try to make that work because, we were selling them at a wholesale price, which is a little bit lower. But then I was thinking, well, if you look at the labor, blah, blah, but whatever, not to bore you. But the physical, the stocking stuff kind of, pushed that along the way. But it was something that we were looking at in terms of exploring and trying to figure out. Now, we had this one this married couple that had bought a coffee shop that we had done business before. And the guy that ran it before, he and another place, there was actually two places in town that were at one point selling bagels and saying that we made them, and it wasn't ours. I swear to God. And man, one of the situations was just the dude was an idiot. Like, he just was an idiot, and just didn't. It wasn't malice. He was just an idiot. And, not an idiot person, good dude, honestly. But just when it came to dealing with situations like purchasing, he was an idiot. He just wasn't made for that stuff. So, the other guy, it was intentional. Like, he was just trying to screw us, and he did a pretty good job at it, but whatever. He kind of got his in the end, but, the karma train pulled in, choo choo. So these other guys took it over, and, they sat down with my wife and I, like, yeah, we're going to go through, 14 dozen bagels a week. No, you don't, for context, that's a lot. I mean, the other place we're working with, I mean, they've hit those numbers fairly consistently, or at least they did. So, that didn't really happen. And I don't know, there was just a weird, I don't know how to explain it. I was thinking about this when I was walking the dog, because I really wanted this to be part of the podcast, because I try to interject life lessons for you to think about, and you don't have to agree with them, but just, food for thought, I suppose. And we're talking about bagels, so it's food. But, and I realize I'm talking very fast today. So they were like, I don't know, you look back, it's hindsight. Hindsight's 2020. You look back along the road and you see those little like things like, holy shit, why didn't I see that at the time that they were potentially doing this? Now, we had a business arrangement, and I'm going to own my part first. Because that's how you succeed in life and in therapy. My part was that I, for whatever reason, felt comfortable enough with these guys to consider them more than just business purchasers, or what the heck, vendors. I don't know what you call it. People that I was doing business with. I felt like there was a chemistry there. Like we had a relationship, like I could trust them type thing. And that's a mistake to a certain degree. It's who I am. That's why I get burned a lot. I feel like it's the only analogy that I can give that hopefully makes sense to anybody is, there was a period of time where I was really dealing with some serious mental health issues, and they put me on a medication called Zoloft. And at the time I was on Zoloft, I was never depressed, but I was never happy. I was always I was like a zombie. Nothing fazed me. So I couldn't find joy. and I couldn't find sadness. And since maybe the sadness was so, the situational sadness was so difficult, maybe I just needed that to kind of get over the hump. But it kind of terrified me for a little bit. And I'm like, dang it, like, I don't ever want to be that guy. Like, I don't want to be that guy who can't experience emotion, like the sad, anger, any of that stuff, because they all kind of exist. You need one to have the other. And I do experience great times of joy. I'll have to say, I mean, I'm looking to my left, my dog Chasm, who is still alive today. Every day with him is a complete blessing. I love this dog. He sits with me, cuddles with me. I got my granddaughter. I have an absolutely beautiful wife. I got some great kids. I got my sister. I got some friends that love me as much as I love them. I've got all that stuff. So I got a lot to love. I'm happy. But, I'm always looking for some of those other relationships, like people that I want to be friends with. I'm a friend guy, So I'm like, oh, these guys are my friends. They're not gonna screw me over. It was weird because I think I told them a little bit too much about some of the backstory in terms of the struggles that we were dealing with the business, all this other stuff. So as we were kind of getting near the end of the business operations, and I had to make the decision whether I was going to let the vendors know before we went public that we were closing. And my thought was, well, I've got some orders. I've got to put these orders out. I know they're going to sell the product because they always do, but I need to make sure that the invoices are all paid before I just start saying this stuff, because I just don't trust people not to pay me. We got stuck with a bunch of unpaid orders the first year, like a lot. The second year, it was better. We got significantly screwed by one vendor that just dragged on paying, and there was just stuff that just didn't get paid. We really hadn't been dealing with that for any serious length of time. There was some slow pay stuff that we dealt with in the last 6 to 8 months, but nothing that wasn't paid. So maybe my feeling was unwarranted. So we did it. We made the announcement. Now the two main vendors we had, the one person called and says, hey, or texted me and all that stuff. It's like, hey, what can we do to help? Is there any way? And they were like, well, maybe we'll look at taking over the operation and yada, yada, yada. And I got another call kind of along the same lines. And I was like, okay, well, this is sort of what I'm looking for, because again, my friend Brian, he shuts down his meat operation. The winery had the capability to just start their own damn meat business, but they said, no, let's help a brother out. And they did. So I thought, oh, well, this is cool. Well, maybe someone will come in and, give us a hand and get things started and everything like that. And because, we were really the only one making bagels. So I don't know, it was 2-3 days after we shut down, there was a smaller operation, somebody we didn't know that started making bagels. And I looked at him, I said, yeah, more power to you. You still got a little ways to go. It's a bit of a learning curve. But they weren't like selling the same types of things we were selling in the same places we were selling, that kind of stuff. So out of the blue, I noticed that this one joint that we were working with the married couple, they're all of a sudden not just making their own bagels. They were selling fresh 4-packs at 25 cents difference in price that we were selling every Saturday morning for the previous, 2 years. Okay. So less than 2 weeks after we'd shut down, they looked at this situation and go, oh shit, look at that. These guys closed down. We'll just take over that aspect of their business and we'll fill that void. So there you go. This is where we're going to go into camps here. We're going to hop into camps. So the one camp is going to be like, hey man, it's business. You stop making them. It's your own damn fault. Right? And there's plenty of people who think that way. But then there's the other camp, which is where I'm in, which is like, that's a phone call. Like, that's where you call up and you go, listen, we're thinking about doing this. You and I have had a business relationship for X amount of time, and I'm not trying to do this to offend you. Are you okay with it? And regardless of how I felt at that point, it is what it is, right? But there's a little bit of common courtesy. I was furious when I saw this. And most of that is probably exaggerated. I shouldn't have been as pissed off as I was. But, people do that. What's going to happen is you're going to get shit stirrers that are going to, tell you about it. Oh, look what these guys are doing. Do you know about this? So I got all them, I got those guys just pissing gasoline on the flame. I don't know if you can piss gasoline. You'd probably be dead if you drank gasoline and had to piss on it. And they're just getting me going like, oh, did you know these guys were going to do that? And I'm like, what the I'm not going to use a word again, but you know what I mean? I was like, wow. I'm like, I got guys that may be taking over the business. I'm stuck with a bunch of flour, toppings, all that stuff. I don't even get a phone call over this. So then I put up an ill-advised to myself. I said, self, post this. And then I did it. And then I took it down. But my intention was, it was just very childish. I could be childish, and I'm owning my childishness, was to poke the bear and start a conversation, which worked. Now, it's a married couple. I think the one, my perception of the two in this relationship is that it's very similar to mine and Tracy's. You got the reasonable one who's pretty, normal baseline, and then you got the other one that's the whatever. So I wasn't going to engage with the normal one. I was going to engage with the creative one because I knew he was the one that for whatever reason was doing this to piss me off, like literally just to piss me off. And at least that was my perception, that he was just doing it to piss me off, saying, oh, look at me. I can do this. I can take your business. I'm a master baker or whatever. And I don't use that term like, oh, master baker. This was, I think the guy was a pastry chef, but he's one of those people that's like, oh, I have a culinary degree and I can do whatever I want. So there's a degree of insult there in saying like, oh, you've been making bagels for 3 years? Oh, that's no big deal. I can do that in a week and a half. That's the perceived offense. Okay. So now the real offense is like, are you just doing this to pick up the ashes of our business before we've even had a chance to determine if we can salvage anything out of it? So think about that for a minute. So you people that are in that firm camp, like, oh, well, hey man, it's business. It's a void. These hardworking young men, they have every right to take over the business, blah, blah, blah. Well, hey man, first of all, they don't know any of the backstory, what happened in terms of the physical aspect. They don't really know where our sales are at, or any of that stuff. Well, I take that back. They did know where our sales were at because he had discussed it with me at length. And they'd constantly be kind of picking at us in terms of, what our sales were. I've been, over the months kind of asked little bits and pieces about the process, all that stuff. And I really didn't have a problem sharing it. I was an idiot to share it in retrospect because they were sitting around waiting for us to shut down because they knew it was coming on some level, whatever. And, oh man, so let me breathe. Okay. So I engaged with this guy. His name's Hans. And he comes at me with like, oh, well, you didn't tell us that the business was closing down. And, so we were going to, our shop was going to be without bagels and blah, blah, blah. So, we took it upon ourselves to do this, this, and this. And this wasn't by any means done something to offend you. And, I got the messages. It's not like I'm making this shit up. I can listen, don't send people written messages unless you want them as backup for something that they're going to say. So if Hans wants to create his narrative and say that that's not what he said it. I got it. You can see it if you really want it. Most people don't give a shit. Nobody will probably ask to see it, but if they do, it's there. So then I get a call, after he and I go through the back and forth and to emphasize the things that he was saying, he basically said in no uncertain terms, oh, you didn't tell us that you were closing. So we needed bagels for the shop. So this is what we did. And so then I get a call from a mutual friend. Here we go. Before I get into the call from the mutual friend, another life lesson. Yeah. If somebody screws me over and they're your friend, like they're your good friend and they've screwed me over, you can still be my friend. I'll never trust you though, ever. I'll never trust you. It's that simple. I won't. Somebody screws over my friend, in most cases, I'm just not going to be their friend. Or if I am, it's going to be very tentative. Okay, I believe in friendships. I realize that situations happen between people, but if there's a concerted effort to kind of screw somebody over and they do it to somebody that I care about, I don't know. I never get this whole, and this was the same phone call I got. It was like, well, I can see both sides. In this situation, there was not both sides. There was the right side. The right side was, again, to make the phone call. He has much admitted that he was pissed that I didn't call him on the short list of people that to say, hey, we're closing. Listen, at the point that I talked to him, we hadn't even told our employees. We were waiting for invoices to be paid. We went later that evening. He and I had talked for about 20 minutes at his store about some things. I dropped more than enough ample hints that we were shutting down fairly quickly. So he had a pretty decent idea that it was coming. Okay. And his reaction was, and again, my buddy calls me, he's like, well, what was he supposed to do? He didn't have any bagels for the shop. Well, listen, these guys were throttling our product for months. In other words, holding it back and having people come to us and go, oh, why are you always out of bagels at this such and such a place? And I'm like looking at Tracy and I go, well, the guys, the one guy's working there full time now. They're probably putting more emphasis on their in-house products. I honestly really didn't take any offense to it. It was annoying because people would come to us, but I was like, yeah, I get it. You sell your own product first before you sell somebody else's because it's a better markup. That's just that kind of sound business. Like I get it, but the thing is if you're putting it, the problem became is that they were putting it on us. Like we weren't fulfilling our end of the deal. Like we weren't giving them the product. That was the part I had a problem with because it's, well, gee, how come you're out of bagels? Because you're not giving them to them? No, because they throttle their orders and they throttle the product. So they put the product out when they wanted to put it out. And if they had something else to sell, they would say that they were out when in fact they weren't out. And by saying that they were out, it made it look like we didn't give it to them. Do I think that this was calculated? Yeah, I do. Absolutely. 100%. I do. So that goes back to this isn't just some little guy going, oh, there's a business, we needed bagels so bad. So, and here's the other thing is that based on his sales figures, which I know what he was selling of our product, supposedly, which again, inaccurate because of the throttling, he probably still had product to last at least a week, if not a week and a half. They ordered every 2 weeks. Let me say it 5 more times. I'm not going to say it 5 more times. They ordered every 2 weeks. It wasn't even 2 weeks before he started trying to sell these 4 packs of bagels. And who sold 4 packs of bagels on Saturday mornings? Well, we did. And so my retort to him and to his friend, which is funny because my mutual friend calls me and goes, hey man, I see both sides. But this is this. And he literally repeated everything that Hans said to me in his message, which is, I'm sure, the shit that he's spewing to anybody that'll talk to him at the coffee shop. I don't know why I take it personally. This guy's not my friend. He's clearly a businessman. He's got to live with himself at the end of the day. I feel used. I'm not happy with it, but we've had nothing but bad experience because, the landlord of that place is somebody that's always treated my wife and I like utter garbage. So I shouldn't have expected anything less. So, see, I got myself worked up. I turn to my left. There's my puppy sleeping, looking comfortable. Man, I love this dog. So, yeah, that was my point. I says, you know what? You've now screwed any ability that we would have had to unload the business, figure out a way to maybe get employees and restart it if we could. Again, difference. Winemaker decided to bring on the mead maker and help them do their business. And that took a while, took probably a month or 2, if not longer. This guy just said, oh, I'm butthurt. You didn't tell me something quick enough. And so I am just going to sell these 4 packs of bagels on Saturdays because he's not doing it anymore. And let's do it quick. And he as much said that he was offended and that he started doing this. Because again, the bagel the bagel thing, like, oh, what are you supposed to do? We don't have bagels for the shop. Well, then make them for the shop. You don't have to literally go after our Saturday morning business, because ultimately, if he made his bagels for in-house for a period of time, and we were able to get back up and running and start selling our 4-packs, we'd be fine. We didn't do enough business with them to warrant. They weren't what we call a Black Widow client. The guy in the other coffee shop was getting to that point. Like he was almost half of our weekly business, if not more. These guys were probably closer to, 15 or 20. And they should have been doing 3 to 5 times the amount of business because they had a larger clientele than the other guy. But they were pushing what they were pushing. And again, they were quasi-sabotaging our operation. And the guy told me that he had ordered these ovens from Subway, and he's a pastry chef. What are Subway ovens made for? Made for making bread. They were planning this all along. I think he just, again, saw the opportunity to swoop in and take it. Am I, is he legally wrong? No, not at all. He can legally do whatever the hell he wants. But at the end of the day, if you have a business relationship with him, because again, same thing on that phone call. The guy goes, well, there's a lady in the other town that's making bagels. I said, but she ain't selling 4-packs in the same town that we sold 4-packs on Saturday mornings within 2 weeks after us shutting down. That's specifically and an intentional targeting of our clientele. That's like going in. These are like the people running in on A Christmas Carol, taking Scrooge's blankets off him 2 minutes after he died. So, and here's the thing. It's like, this guy was never my friend. Clearly, this was always a business deal. And he was, he's all like, well, business. You were a good business. You were a good vendor. I never had a problem doing business with you. Business. Well, okay. Well, if it's just business, it's just business. So you're still an asshole. There's still ways to do business, especially on a local level. And I guarantee there'll be very few people that know the both of us that'll listen to this podcast. But I guarantee that this guy will go on his own little rage campaign and somehow make himself look like a victim. And more power to you, dude. More power to you. I don't wish them ill. I don't. It's hard to be in business. It is very hard to be in business. But you know what? I hope somebody in their life talks a little bit of common sense to them and says, you don't do people like that. And this dude owed me a legitimate apology. It's too late now. Like I just, I'm not, this is going to sound like it's a lot bigger of a deal than it is, because the guy wasn't my friend, but he really, for all intents and purposes, is dead to me. Like, I have no reason to patronize his business. I would not go to a fundraiser for him if he became ill. I don't wish him bad, but I mean, whatever. If you're going to treat me like that, I'm done with you. And again, it goes back full circle to the whole thing with the stalker and continuing to become a victim. We got screwed by a lot of people during the bagel operation. And maybe it's because I'm oversensitive. This is what those close to me tell me a lot of times. You're very sensitive, Tom, which I am. But you know what? I'll close with this, because somebody said this to me yesterday, and I took it as a very high compliment. You know what? You've never gone out of your way to screw somebody over. And it's a God's honest truth. And listen, if I have, let me know, man, because I'll legitimately apologize. I'm not going to make excuses for it. There's not a damn thing I did to these guys. Nothing, ever. The only thing we did was work overnight, cause physical damage to ourselves, creating a product that they could sell. And within 2 weeks, the only thing that they could get out of that is they couldn't even put something on their social media that just said, oh, hey, listen, thanks for the business. We're really sorry you guys went out of business. We're going to, with Papa Thom's blessing, we're going to start selling bagels on Saturdays. You know what? We both would have won in that situation. We both would have won. I could have sold him some of my inventory. Shit, I would have helped him with the recipe. We would have kept all the work that we did alive, even though we weren't financially profiting from it. At least it would have kept things going. That would have been the right thing to do. But at the end of the day, Hans is about Hans. Hans is about Hans. Yes, that's what he is. I could tell, because let me tell you, I don't, this constant self-promotion as the baker extraordinaire, whatever. Hey man, I'm sure you got a lot of talent, buddy. We all got a lot of talent in something. Okay? That doesn't mean that you could turn around and, whip your ego out and then turn around and just try to take somebody else's business and just kick them to the curb like they're some kind of trash. I'm not trash, man. I'm not trash. And sure, there's still going to be that little camp that's going to sit on the left, the Hans camp, little Hans, the businessman. I'm not that guy. I'm not. I'm not gonna pretend anymore. I'm not gonna just sit back. And again, my sister and I had this conversation. Like, you kind of got to let these go. I'm gonna let it go after this episode because I got it out of my system. But I hope I never get to the point where I become this bullshit spewer that says, well, there's always two sides to the story. It's a cop-out, dude. It's a cop-out. In almost every situation, there is a clear right and a clear wrong with some nuances of gray in the middle. And if you can present me a majority of situations where that's not the case, then you're a freaking genius. You should become a philosopher of some sort, because I don't buy that. To me, that is just the ultimate cop-out. So I don't look at this as a situation that was a gray area. If that, this is emotional, but you know what? That little punk knew what he was doing, and he did it intentionally. No different than the scumbag that was going after me and my family and my granddaughter. Okay, you do things that you know you're doing, and if people make excuses for you, like, oh, there was, here, listen, if you screw me over, and the old expression is, if you piss on me and tell me it's rain, okay, I'm not going to buy it. I'm not going to buy it. And if there's ever an indication when somebody has done that to you, they will always say this, well, I didn't mean to offend you. When somebody tells you they didn't mean to offend you, they know they offended you, and they offended you on purpose. Because in those situations, the lead-in is this. Hey, look, man, I am really sorry. What can we do to make it right? When you say, what can we do to make it right? That's the beginning of the healing process. It's not, well, I didn't mean to offend you. Because that language right there says this. Not only does it say that you knew that you offended the person, you literally are putting it on that individual to say, oh, well, you're the one that's offended. So now you've taken your hands and you've washed your hands of the situation, and you've just thrown it back on the other person. Yeah, that's what it is. There's some Bagel Logic in this one today, isn't there? Okay, a lot of stuff today. Anyhow, if you've made it this far, thanks for listening. Hey, if you made it this far, hell, send me an email or a message or something. I got to know somebody's out there listening. Otherwise, this is like a it's like a AI therapist, They don't really exist. They don't ever listen. They just generate answers. All right. For my dog Chasm, cutest little pup in the world who's sitting to my left, and myself, it's been the Bagel Logic Podcast. See you next time.